Roger Gracie is one of the greatest jiu-jitsu athletes to ever compete in the sport of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Some would say that he's top 10, some might even say he's top 5, and others might say that he's the best of all time. I'd be interested to hear your guys' take, but that's not for me to decide. Let me know down in the comments below. So before we get further into this video, we're going to break down his appearance on the Lex Freedmond podcast, take away a couple of gold nuggets that he really gave that any jiu-jitsu student can take away from and start to implement into their own jiu-jitsu game. So stick around. We're going to get into it right now. How's it going, everyone? My name is Chasen Hill. I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I've been teaching and training jiu-jitsu now for 14 plus years. So if you guys like all things jiu-jitsu, this is probably a pretty good channel for you guys to check out. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. Also hit that bell icon. That way you guys never miss the latest video. And thank you to all the new subscribers that we've had recently. I really greatly appreciate you guys supporting the channel. So one reason why I wanted to do this is because I did a similar video talking about John Danaher's appearance on Lex Freedmond as well. And I've now had a lot of people reach out and say, could I do the one on Hodger? And they would be interested in hearing that. I also had some people on the John Danaher one try to say I was trying to monetize off of it and that you should go watch the original version and not listen to me, which absolutely you should go watch the original version. So if you guys want to check out Hodger's appearance and the full video, you can check that out right here. Thing is that I know for a fact that I pushed people to go watching the full interview of Danaher on Lex Freedmond. They didn't even know that he is maybe on there. They weren't aware that he appeared on there, or maybe newer people who are to jiu-jitsu who just don't know who that is have now been driven to that. And I also know that I boosted some of John Danaher's sales because people actually bought his instructionals off that last video. So I just want to be clear about that and be transparent that everything that I'm doing on this video is to try to promote and for you guys to go check out more of their information. Let's give a quick shout out to today's sponsor of this video. We have Gracie BJJ. I love some of their gis and rash guards that they have. You guys can see me right here wearing the classic gold weave gi and the long sleeve rash guard. I like the softness of how the top feels of this specific gi, and it's pretty lightweight actually for its durability that it has. You guys can head over to their website at goldbjj.com to check out a bunch of their other gis and all their other inventory that they have. They're always updating and adding new products. Also, if you guys use my link in the description down below, I will send you a free gift of this body wash to rub all the nasty mat fungus off you after you guys get done training. So check them out, Gold BJJ. So let's get into the breakdown of the video. So we're going to look at a few highlighted sections that they talked about. It was a very cool podcast. It was basically a jiu-jitsu masterclass getting inside the head of one of the greatest jiu-jitsu competitors of all time. They started off by talking about his infamous matches with Buchecha, which are probably some of his most famous jiu-jitsu matches, his time that he spent in MMA, and just kind of how he got started in jiu-jitsu. So there's a lot of story and explaining of Hodger's background that's very interesting and that I personally didn't know about. But one of the things that's always fascinated me about Hodger and guys like Marcelo Garcia, for example, is a lot of times when they were very dominant in the sport, they were training with people who are significantly less skilled than them. There's this attitude now in jiu-jitsu, or that with a lot of students, these super schools are being built, that you're training with like the best jiu-jitsu competitors and diamond sharpens diamond and that kind of mindset. But you have two of the greatest competition competitors to ever compete who mainly competed with people who were not as good as them.
There's a lot of people that do jiu-jitsu for decades and don't get better.
No, because they don't train the way they should. They don't train to get better, they train to get tough. There's a big difference. Most people, they train to get tough, so they are tough.
And so Hodger really goes into depth on how to get value out of training with people who are less skilled than you and how to structure your training. You can definitely do the diamond versus diamond idea. That definitely has value, but some of you guys who are wanting to get better, you might become the best person in your school one day, or you maybe don't have the world champion. So how do you actually get value out of training with your training partners? So one of the first thing that he challenges Lex Freedmond on, which is interesting because Lex is a jiu-jitsu black belt as well, is they talk about this idea of focus training or purposeful training. Lex is talking about that he never really liked being inside of the closed guard position. Hodger says, well, that's because you never spent much time developing it. And then Lex kind of admits that, yeah, I kind of shied away from it. I got good at other things.
It forces me to learn. And then I fell in love with the butterfly guard and the open guard and so on. And I never really understood the closed guard. And the other thinking was, do I really need to understand the closed guard? Because it's always by choice that I go there. So I can avoid not.
I mean, you can avoid anything you want. I mean, you don't have to do anything. But
in this life, yes.
It doesn't make you complete.
So I just avoided getting comfortable in the closed guard. And this points out such a glaring, obvious problem that's done in a lot of jiu-jitsu schools is I think a lot of times, not always, but because of the tournament scene, you're encouraged to train your strengths a lot more than your weaknesses. A lot of schools don't encourage you to identify what your weaknesses are. And there's actual strategies that you can do that with that I actually teach. But being able to identify what you suck at is actually very important to improving your jiu-jitsu. You have to remember, whenever you're training jiu-jitsu, training is the key word, right? So you're training to get better. And my default is when I'm teaching my students is if you're training the things that you suck at, you have no choice but to get better. There are times that you want to train the things that you're good at, but that's for when you're getting closer to competition and you're just a couple days or a couple weeks out, you want to start incorporating those things. But because we live such in a competition-driven environment and maybe your school really promotes that, you think that's what you need to do to get promoted, you only have that mindset as opposed to training for long-term or training for life. You need to understand how to structure your training to set yourself up for success and to climb that totem pole over and over again. So Hodger talks to Lex a lot about that, about purposeful and mindful training and how to actually position yourself and put yourself in bad positions. So that's an absolute masterclass on that. And I actually have all kinds of videos on that throughout this channel that if you guys want to check out. The next thing that he talks about, advice for general practitioners, maybe people who are training just 2 or 3 days a week, is the idea about moving slow, focus on breathing, and train the same thing over and over again.
What advice would you give to, let's start with a complete beginner. So, a bunch of people come up to me. They still want to start doing jiu-jitsu. What advice would you give them?
Try to absorb as much technique as you can and try to be as relaxed as you can. Don't desperately try to fight so hard. Like, learn and move slow.
So many times students think that they're not moving as slow as they are, or they're breathing more than they actually are. But focusing on those little things make a big difference. And also training things over and over again is extremely important in order to improve your jiu-jitsu. The other thing that I see a lot in the jiu-jitsu community is everything is about buying the next instructional or learning the next technique or doing the next seminar, adding more stuff to your jiu-jitsu library instead of just focusing on the stuff that you actually know and figuring out a way to make it better. That is the definition of a system or a process, is to develop something over time. What are the steps that you need to develop something? How do you take something from being really bad to actually really good? What are the process or the steps that you have to do in order to do that? And a lot of times that's just kind of blown by in most of the jiu-jitsu world, versus we actually should be teaching students how to do that. This brings up to the next point. Hodger also says that usually if a technique doesn't work, it's not because the technique's not working, but it's because you're failing the technique.
Yeah. Is there advice you can give to an adult? So like somebody that has a job, like a hobbyist, like how to progress, how to get
they train. They just need to train. Not 5-7 days a week because you're going to get injured. Practice the same thing over and over again. When they don't work, it's just because you're not doing well, not because, you have to learn something else.
And this is the same idea that usually if something is not working for you, that's a technique that you've learned, you shouldn't just necessarily throw it away. You should really dive deep into it and figuring out why the technique's not working. Is it that your position is off? Is it that you're missing a step? Are you missing a detail? Sometimes it's that the person's actually doing the appropriate counter, and you might need more information or knowledge in order on how to solve that problem. But a lot of times learning more stuff isn't the solution. 99% of the time, it's not. Most of the time, it's just figuring out what you're already working on and making that incrementally better over time. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you enjoy about this podcast? If you watched it, what were some of your big takeaways? What are some things that you're going to implement? Let me know down in the comments below. Another big idea that Hodger really talks to Lex about is this idea about when it's important to not focus on drilling as much and when to focus on sparring. Now, I want to be clear about that. He's not saying that you should never drill or just do more sparring, but he uses the idea that once you learn all the mechanics and the mechanisms and how the technique works, and you can do that to a certain level of proficiency over and over again, drilling does not have as much benefit as it would now doing that move under resistance in sparring. And I absolutely agree with this.
What's the role of drilling? Do you like drilling?
I do not like drilling, but I'll tell you why. Fighting is mechanic. It's very important to drill a move until you learn the mechanic. The moment that you know how to apply it, there's no more point in drilling. Now you have to practice with resistance. Of course, you're not going to practice with the guy fully resisting. The guy's better than you because he's not going to give you a chance to practice that move. But you have to practice with resistance. When you already know the mechanics, the drilling with no resistance is not going to teach you anything because you will never know how to apply the movement with resistance. So it's pointless to carry on drilling after you learn the mechanics.
I have a whole video that I talk about the difference between drilling and sparring right here and why you should do one versus the other one. I like the way that he put it about learning the mechanics. That's a good way to determine the level of proficiency. I like to tell students that until you've reached about 80 to 90% proficiency, until you can almost do it invisible man style or shadow style, or like even go through the steps in your head and get that accurate up to 80, 90%, then you should still be drilling that technique. Once you have accomplished that, now that technique needs to be done against resistance. So how do you do it against different levels of training partners? Do you do it on more white belts or blue belts or purple belts or whatever you guys need to work on? This was an interesting thing talking about drilling. He said that actually you get a diminishing return if you spend too much time drilling once you learn the mechanisms. And I agree with that. Now, sometimes you do need to take the technique through more drilling than you do sparring. But you will see this in this relationship as you get more skilled in jiu-jitsu, because as you're coming up through the ranks, as you're coming up through white, blue, purple, brown, and black, and so on, that usually as you go up those ranks, you're learning a bunch of stuff. You're learning a bunch of information. So you're able to relate that to the new techniques and stuff that you're learning. So you're not needing to drill as much versus more develop it in sparring. Once again, I'm not saying you should never drill. I'm just saying that once you kind of become a little bit more skilled and as you climb up the ratio, it's not just 50-50 anymore or whatever, you're going to be sparring a lot more than you are going to be drilling. Now that brings me to the last point, talking about purposeful sparring and who you should be sparring with. I had a whole video talking about how to use your different levels of training partners right here that I kind of give you guys a good idea about. I have plans on doing more detailed breakdowns of this idea in the future, but understanding when you guys are trying to train something, what techniques are actually in what phase. So are they in the beginning phase? Are they in the middle phase? Are they in the completion phase? Basically, do I need to be drilling them more? Should I be trying them against more white belts or lesser skilled people or people who are more skilled than me? And these are all great questions, because the thing is that there's not one answer. It really depends on your abilities and your skill set. So if you guys can kind of do a deep dive into your own jiu-jitsu, then it would really help quite a bit. So that's going to be it for this video. I really enjoyed the podcast. I really enjoyed Hodger's breakdown. I think it echoes a lot of the same things that I've talked about on this channel, but I like to hear his backstory and someone with that kind of credentials kind of saying those same things. And so if we can spread the same message, then it's all good in the hood and more people can hear it and people can start having success in jiu-jitsu a lot sooner. Thank you guys for making it to the end of this video. If you guys are wanting more help, you guys can make sure you visit my free acceleration guide that's down in the description below. Also, I'm enrolling new students into my Blueprint coaching program. You guys can book a call with me and we can chat. I don't let anyone in without doing an interview first to make sure that there's not a fish that ruins the rest of the pond. So make sure you guys hit me up. Worst case, you just get a free phone call with me and we can chat it up and I can maybe get you pointed in the right direction. So make sure you guys take advantage of that. And until next time, I'll see y'all later.